This is VK3CSJ in Narre Warren South. Please stand by for this morning's WIA broadcast at 9 a.m. on 1825 kHz in the 160 metre amateur radio band. This is VK3CSJ in Narre Warren South. Please stand by for this morning's WIA broadcast at 9 a.m. on 1825 kHz in the 160 metre amateur radio band.
This national news edition originates from VK1WIA and is rebroadcast throughout Australia and around the world under a common licence published on the WIA website. This WIA national news service is copyright to the Wireless Institute of Australia, and rebroadcast is authorised only under the provisions of that common licence. WIA Director and Company Secretary Peter Cleave, VK8ZZ.
From Australia, this is the Wireless Institute of Australia with the weekly news service. This broadcast is in text, audio and video and is accessed on wia.org.au.
And in WIA National News this week, Grant VK5GR, your WIA Technical Advisory Committee Chairperson, Chris VK3FY on behalf of the Board of the Wireless Institute of Australia. ACMA released their 5-year Spectrum Outlook 2025-2030. Discussion point with Dougal VK4EKA, Alan VK4SN on behalf of the WIA Radio Activities Contest Committee. Peter VK7PD for the Radio Amateurs Old Timers Club of Australia, and Alan VK2COD, a member of Australia's official Youngsters on the Air group. But wait, there's more, much more in the reticule for this week's national WIA news from the Wireless Institute of Australia for week commencing Sunday, November 2, 2025, and I'm Editor Graham VK4BB.
This is the Wireless Institute of Australia and VK1WIA.
This is Grant VK5GR, your WIA Technical Advisory Committee Chairperson, with some news about a community consultation being launched looking at changes to the Australian amateur radio band plans. It has been some years now since a wholesale review of our band plans has been conducted. In that time, we've seen various changes made to what radio spectrum amateur radio operators can access and under what conditions they can access it. We've also received various requests for changes or recognition of various activities on the bands from various members of the Australian amateur radio community. As a result, we've decided to conduct a wide-ranging review of the existing band plans and are proposing various changes across almost all of the bands, addressing one or many of the issues that have been posted to us since the last major review several years ago. The areas we're going to be addressing include highlighting centres of activity for AM and emergency call channels on the HF bands, changes to align the 630 and 160 metre band plans with current operating practices, revising the 6 metre band given the standard class licences can now access the whole band. We'll be conducting a review of the 23 centimetre band in light of the new conditions determined by ITU member states at the last WRC conference. We'll be looking to improve clarity on how the 3.3 GHz band can be used, and we'll be adding new segments for areas of interest on the 9, 6, 3 and 13 centimetre bands for FM repeaters. We've conducted a revision of the ATV segments considering the extensive adoption of digital ATV modes today. We've undertaken a review of repeater subbands and the growth of digital voice hotspots on 2 metres and 70 centimetres. We've also provided new band plan data for the microwave bands between 24 and 241 GHz, showing current centres of activity. So as you can see, the review has been very comprehensive. However, that review is just the first step. Next, we're seeking the views of the amateur community on the changes we're proposing. To do this, we've published a paper discussing the changes and have provided a template response to help amateurs form their opinions and communicate them back to us here at the Technical Advisory Committee. That consultation paper is now open and will remain open through till December the 12th. We welcome feedback from all VK radio amateurs. Details of the consultation content and process are now available on the WAA website, so if you're interested to see what's proposed and wish to have a say, take a look over on waa.org.au, take a read of the consultation paper and then consider making a submission. We'd love to hear from you. Best regards from Grant, VK5GR, on behalf of the WAA Technical Advisory Committee.
This is Krista Matrievich, VK3FY, with this week's board report for VK1 WIA Weekly News. This week's topic is Not-for-Profit Organisations Declaration. Most affiliated clubs declare themselves as being not-for-profit organisations. So it is the time of year when non-charitable, not-for-profit organisations must confirm their eligibility for income tax exemption each year. This is done by lodging an ATO not-for-profit self-review return. Clubs that are not-for-profits and have a current ABN must declare that they are exempt from lodging an income tax return by a self-assessment lodgement with the ATO. Clubs that do not have an ABN do not need to undertake the self-review. See the details of the NFP self-review in the news article of the WIA News webpage. The WIA are keen to hear from individuals or clubs that might be interested in joining the WIA social media team. Please send your expressions of interest to the WIA Secretary at the address detailed in the text edition of this broadcast, secretary@wa.org.au. This has been Krista Matrievich, VK3FY, on behalf of the Board of the Wireless Institute of Australia for VK1 WIA Weekly News.
It is the WIA National News, and ACMA released their 5-year Spectrum Outlook 2025 to 30, then Discussion Point with Dougal, VK4EKA. Informed by Spectrum users, ACMA's Spectrum Outlook 2025 to 30 provides an overview of technology, market and policy drivers likely to shape spectrum demand over the next 5 years. It also sets out ACMA's work program for the current financial year. In March of 2025, they invited comments on the draft, and they received 35 public submissions, including from representative bodies, government agencies, individuals and the satellite and telecommunication sectors.
This is Dougal, VK4EKA. For Australian amateurs, the class licence determines the technical and operating conditions, such as bands of operation, transmitter power levels and modes of operation. The common class licence also requires a person to undertake a safety assessment for electromagnetic energy safety. The licence assigns a station call sign to operate at a location or portable as determined by the licensee. How does this work for club call signs? The class licence says nothing. However, before the class licence there were special rules for clubs, such as who could operate the station, where it operated from, that is, a location authorised by the management or a general meeting, and that a log must be kept. Recently, the WIA in Victoria, the holder of VK4WI, was advised they did not know where and by whom the call was being used in Queensland. Perhaps under the class licence, a club can be used anywhere by anyone with no records. Just asking. This is Dougal, VK4EKA.
From here, there and everywhere, you've tuned to the Wireless Institute of Australia's National News Service. We are VK1WIA. Now with international news, Jason, VK2LAW.
Hello. Leading this week's international news, Hurricane Melissa made landfall in Jamaica October 28 just after 1 a.m. as one of the most powerful hurricane landfalls ever in the Atlantic Basin. Hurricane winds at 165 miles per hour were battering the area, and the National Hurricane Center in Miami, Florida, reports that Melissa was expected to bring rainfall of 15 to 30 inches in portions of Jamaica and additional rainfall of 6 to 8 inches with localized maximum to 12 inches for southern Hispaniola, with storm total local maxima of 40 inches possible. The Hurricane Watch Network, HWN, is active on 14.3250 MHz USB. Our thoughts with all. A giant radio telescope in Crimea, used in the past to support missions to Mars and Venus and attempt to contact alien civilizations, has been destroyed in a drone attack. Ukrainian Defence Forces took down the 70-metre antenna dish to prevent Russian forces from using it to guide attacks on its territory. The RT-70 radio telescope has been under Russian control since the annexation of the Crimea Peninsula in 2014. According to Defence Express, Russians carried out major upgrades to the 5,000 metric ton structure to use it for military communications. Don't touch that dial. The Canadian Radio, Television and Telecommunications Commission will no longer require broadcast radio stations to renew their licences, as part of a rule it said it has adopted to help stations save money and shrink administrative burdens. The Commission said it was hoping the action would amount to a boost for terrestrial broadcasting, which, while facing challenges recently, nonetheless remains a vital source of news, information and culture. Since 1863, only 3,511 men and 1 woman have been awarded a US Medal of Honor. Today there are only 60 living Medal of Honor recipients. The average American has a 0.000018% chance of ever meeting a Medal of Honor recipient in person, but everyone who attends Hamcation 2026 will have the honour to meet a living Medal of Honor recipient. For the first time ever, a living Medal of Honor recipient will be attending Hamcation and is passed the exam to become a licensed amateur radio operator and will make his first ham radio contact at Hamcation. Colonel Don Doc Ballard, MOH USA retired. He earned his medal in Vietnam. His ham instructor, Sam McGlynn, November Mike 5 November, Lieutenant Colonel, US Air Force retired, along with Donna Snow King, Whiskey 5 Sierra Mike Lima, former star of the hit TV show Texas Flip and Move, and author of 3 books, along with her OM Rex, Whiskey 5 Echo Alpha Kilo, Lieutenant Commander, US Navy retired, will be together in their booth. As part of a much larger overhaul focused on deleting almost 400 obsolete wireless regulations, the Federal Communications Commission, FCC, has announced plans to delete or modify 4 minor provisions of Part 97. American Radio Relay League's Washington Council has reviewed the proposal and agrees that the deletions are to obsolete rules and will have no impact on today's modern amateur radio service. One of the deletions was suggested by ARRL as part of an earlier FCC request for public input on rules ripe for deletion. Keeping a long story short, proposed regulatory changes are: number 1, the provision relating to the FCC's right to modify station licences. Its deletion will result in no substantive change to the right of the FCC to modify a station licence. Number 2, this provision specified the procedure to replace paper licences. The FCC stopped producing paper licences at the end of 2020. The ARRL proposed deleting this section in comments filed earlier this year. Number 3, delete the provision grandfathered HF amplifiers purchased before April 28, 1978 by an amateur radio operator for use at that operator station, and also grandfathered those manufactured before April 28, 1978, for which a marketing waiver was issued. The applicability of this rule has long passed. Number 4, the rule and appendix relating to VEC regions, which were based on the traditional amateur call sign areas. The FCC no longer limits VECs to regions, and there's no reason for doing so given the nature of remote exams. And to close out international news this week, weird and wonderful. The chances of anything coming from Mars are 1,000,000 to 1, he said. The chances of anything coming from Mars are 1,000,000 to 1, but still they come. Whiskey Oscar Whiskey amateur radio station marks Mars invasion at Grover's Mill, USA. To commemorate the anniversary of Orson Welles' infamous 1938 War of the Worlds Halloween broadcast, members of the Delaware Valley Radio Association gathered at Grover's Mill, site of the fictional Martian landing, and set up temporary radio station Whiskey Oscar Whiskey and communicated with other ham radio operators around the world this last Sunday, October 26. For WIA National News in Sydney, I'm Jason, VK2LAW.
We are VK1WIA. Now, operational news with VK4FUQ. Felix.
Hello there. Only a month away till the Yoda Contest December. The Fisher's Ghost Amateur Radio Club are hosting the inaugural VK Yoda Contest the entire month of December. Then just 3 days from then, what we call the VK Yoda Contest comes round 3 of the Yoda Contest organised by the IAA Region 1 New Working Group in cooperation with the Hungarian Amateur Radio Society. December 29. A great way to gain extra contacts for the VK Contest organised by Fisher's Ghost AR Club. Now VK4SN and John Moyle News.
Hi everyone, this is Alan, VK4 Sierra November, on behalf of the WIA Radio Activities Contest Committee. Dennis, VK4AE, has resigned from the position of manager of the John Moyle Memorial Field Day Contest. The committee wishes Dennis all the best and thanks him for his many years of volunteering. New rules. After many emails and a lot of input from committee members, a bit of club input and other experienced users, this has resulted in streamlined replacement rules suitable for computer log checking, along with simple scoring for HF and VHF combined. The new rules will be released soon. In the meantime, we are looking for a manager who has good computer skills, including Excel spreadsheet data manipulation and Microsoft Word mail merge for certificate publication. Preferably, this person is a regular contester and is familiar with normal contest log submission and processing. In the event a manager is not found, Diane, VK4DI, and I are willing to co-manage the contest to keep it running. Thank you. Best 73s. This is Alan, VK4 Sierra November.
Now let's open the DX window to the world. Many special events are planned to celebrate 2025 Remembrance Day. November 11, 1500 hours Zulu to 2000 hours Zulu, KA4TAL, Hori Post 111 of the African Legion, Amateur Radio Club, South Carolina. We'll be on the air using 14.255, 7.264, 14.275 and 7.185 MHz. WJ4DD, the All Amateur Radio Society in Florida, will be on 7.225 and 14.250 MHz. The celebration will include the birthdays of the Naval Air Station at Jacksonville and the birthday of the United States Marines. W2B, the New River Valley Amateur Radio Club, Virginia, will celebrate Veterans Day from the National D-Day Memorial in Bedford, with special event station on 14.275 MHz. ZL100C is a call sign celebrating the centenary of NZART, the New Zealand Association of Radio Transmitters. which was formed on the 16th of August 1926. The call sign is valid until 6 August 2026. QSL via the Bureau and LOTW. SOTA Croatia is marking 10 years. Listen for the special call sign 9A10 SOTA. The call sign is on the air through to 2026, the 30th of September 2026 to be precise. A certificate will be available for contacts made between the 1st of October and the 31st of December this year. QSL by LOTW. Special call sign OT5 ID PD will be active from the 4th of November to December 3 for the International Day of Persons with Disabilities, whose annual observance, 3 December, was proclaimed by the United Nations General Assembly in 1992. All operators will be hams with a disability. The logs will be uploaded to LOTW, Club Log and EQSL. All QSOs will be confirmed automatically via the Bureau. For WIA National News, I'm Felix, VK4FUQ Inningham.
From here, there and everywhere, you tune to the Wireless Institute of Australia's National News Service. We are VK1WIA. Now, Special Interest Group News with Cole, VK3GTV.
Hello, first up in the segment, it's Worldwide Special Interest Groups, balloons. Pico balloons, to be exact. The ZS1ERZ-12 Pico balloon is on its 7th circumnavigation around the globe. The balloon travelled over 210,000 kilometres in 62 days. At the time of this story's compilation, Wednesday last, the balloon was just above 12,000 metres above sea level and west-southwest of Amsterdam Island. Amsterdam is way out in the Pacific, kinda nor-northeast of New Zealand. You can follow the balloon on aprs.fi, type in ZS1ERZ-12 and press the search button. Worldwide Special Interest Groups, Digital. Amateur Radio Digital Communications has a mission to support the tinkerers, the dreamers and the builders who keep ham radio strong. They recently issued a reminder that they're actively looking for applicants. Grants are available from ARDC, giving top priority to projects in one of several areas, supporting satellite technology for ham analog and digital communications, developing hands-on, open-source and educational materials and projects for learners in schools and clubs, and delving into open-source hardware and software systems that include STRs, new modulation techniques and codec technologies. ARDC said that projects outside these areas would also be welcome to apply, but these areas are closest to the core of the organisation's goal of promoting the freedom to tinker, build, communicate and openly share information. Worldwide Special Interest Groups, Final Frontier. 2 Aussie contacts with the ISS over this weekend. Australian Air League, Adelaide, South Australia, Telebridge via VK4ISS. The ISS call sign is presently scheduled to be NA1SS. The scheduled crew member is Mike Fink, KE5AIT, and the ARIS mentor is Shane Lind, VK4KHZ. Contact is go for Friday the 31st of October at 0959 UTC, and 39 degrees is ISS maximum elevation. Then a QTech conference in Wavell State High School, Queensland, Australia, Telebridge via VK4ISS. The ISS call sign is presently scheduled to be NA1SS. The scheduled crew member is Johnny Kim, KJ5HKP, and once again the ARIS mentor is Shane Lind, VK4KHZ. Contact is go for Saturday the 1st of November, 0910 UTC, and this time 86 degrees will be maximum elevation. Worldwide Special Interest Groups, IOTA, Islands on the Air, Banana Island, IOTA AF037, 9 Lima, 9 Lima. To avoid any confusion with the ongoing 9L8MD operations from the Sierra Leone mainland, the IOTA activity will use the special call sign of 9 Lima 9 Lima, November 2nd until November 10. The last time the island was activated was in 2019. Several landing teams of 2 operators each will alternate from the island, staying for 3 days, 2 nights in a local resort.
Due to the lack of anything on the island, especially electricity, these operators will bring all necessary stuff by boat with them, including a generator and fuel. At the end of the 3-day shift, the new team will bring the refuelling for the next 3 days. Bands will be from 40 through to 6 metres, with verticals on HF and a 3-element Yagi for 6 metres. The island has not been activated on 6 metres before. Since the shortage of electricity, radios will operate with just their barefoot power of 100 watts, so to be heard on air will be particularly challenging. The call again, 9 Lima, 9 Lima. Worldwide Special Interest Groups, Military. The Austrian Military Radio Society is the amateur radio club of the Austrian Armed Forces and forms part of the Austrian Experimental Transmitter Association. It was founded in 1962 as a branch of the Austrian Armed Forces, at that time under the name Austrian Military Radio Section. Its origins lie in the development abroad in the Congo at the time. The aim was to establish connections between soldiers on deployment and their families at home, a kind of home radio that was intended to reassure and inform. What tasks were added afterwards? In addition to private messages, official communications also took place via telex and voice radio. There were hardly any functioning communication lines back then. Many devices still came from the occupying powers, so radio amateurs who had the know-how and technology were called upon. This is how the AMRS became a permanent fixture. This was later followed by missions in the Golan and on Cyprus, where shortwave radio links were established. The United States Air Force Military Auxiliary Radio System will hold its 77th annual special event from 0001 UTC November 8 through to 2359 UTC November 11 this year. Stations W1A, W1E, W1C and W1W will be on the air from Scott Air Force Base, Illinois, on 80 through to 10 metres, excluding 60 metres, using voice, CW and FT8. All amateur radio operators are invited to participate in the event. A downloadable certificate will be available in mid-December. And for more information, visit Air Force Military Auxiliary Radio System on afmars.com. Time now for the latest Worldwide Special Interest Group news from Radio Amateur Oldtimers.
Hello everyone, this is Peter, VK7PD, reminding you that tomorrow is the first Monday of the month. Time for the Radio Amateurs Oldtimers Club of Australia's November Bulletin to go to air. This month, instead of the usual broadcast, we will offer an historical broadcast from years past by Alan Doble, VK3AMD, from March 2003. The usual news and information will be broadcast next month. Everyone, RAOTC members and non-members alike, is most welcome to listen to the program and to join in the callbacks afterwards. Full details of all transmissions times and modes can be found on the RAOTC website at www.raotc.org.au or just Google RAOTC broadcasts. If none of the transmission times suits you, you can download the audio file at any time from today from the club website. Once again, tune in tomorrow for the November RAOTC Bulletin. Enjoy the program and please join in the callbacks afterwards. 73 from Peter, VK7PD.
Thanks, Peter. Next up, it's Worldwide Special Interest Group's Radio Amateur Youngtimers, YOTA, Youngsters on the Air, with Alan, VK2COD.
Thank you, Cole. To start with, let me remind you that Youngsters on the Air month takes place in December. The RSGB in the United Kingdom says Special Corps GB25 YOTA will be active throughout the month. Here in VK, we have the first VK YOTA contest throughout December. Turning to various parts of the world, emergency communicators continue to promote the use of amateur service as well as other modes and methods to the next generation. In India, ham radio operators are focusing more on DMR, digital mobile radio, as an alternative to an analog VHF, UHF, and HF. 50 young hams were recently given training in DMR programming and operating by Indian Academy of Communication and Disaster Management and the West Bengal Radio Club. According to the club secretary Arbash Nag Biswas, VU2 2JFA. This was the first hands-on training in DMR for radio operators who will be using DMR in the vast remote Delta region known as the Sundarbans. Meanwhile, in the Philippines, members of the Ham Radio Emergency Communications Group Inc. DX1HAM devoted parts of the 68th Annual Jamboree on the Air to teach Boys Scouts of the Philippines the basics of operating two-way radios. The hams were preparing the next generation for using the radio's licensed emergency communicators used when severe storms threatened public safety in the Western Pacific Island group. So please write to the WIA news team about your VK Yoda activities so we can tell the rest of the world. For WIA National News, I'm Alan VK2COD in Sydney. Now back to you, Cole.
Thanks, Alan. Next up, Worldwide Special Interest Group's video. The amateur radio on the International Space Station program has reason to celebrate. With the help and hard work of technicians, engineers and other team members, ARIS marked the first contact in 7 years that made use of ham TV. This was a QSO between the first Radford Semele Scout Group in the UK and NASA astronaut Johnny Kim, KJ5HKP. The digital amateur TV transmitter, based in the Columbus module, permits the audience to view live video downlinks during their contacts with the astronauts. To see the ham TV contact between the ISS and the Scouts, visit the YouTube channel of SP5LOT at the link in the text and video versions of this week's WIA National News. And that's it for another week of Worldwide Special Interest Group News. I'm Cole, VK3GTV.
Here to date, clubs are welcome to email text with audio for this section, nationalnews@wia.org.au, and next weekend in VK4 it's the Gold Coast Amateur Radio Society's Hamfest. Now till next we meet, I'm Graham VK4BB. Walk softly.
From Australia, this has been the Wireless Institute of Australia with the weekly news service. This broadcast is in text, audio and video and is accessed on wia.org.au.
Courtesy of Bevan, VK5BD's ATV and YouTube channel, this has been WIA National News. We're back now, live and local, and your voice, your callbacks. And don't forget, tick like.
Hello there, this is VK3OTN, the official station of the Radio Amateur Old-Timers Club of Australia, with a monthly news broadcast for members and friends of the club for November 2025. This month, instead of the usual broadcast, we will offer an historical broadcast from years past. The usual news and information will be broadcast next month. I'm Andrew, VK3 Charlie Alpha Hotel. I have broadcast files going back as far as 2001. Many of the older files aren't the greatest as far as technical quality goes, archived in either real audio or Windows Media Audio format. These produced a smaller file size back in the days when the leading edge technology was dial-up internet. Remember that? This month we have an original broadcast from March 2003. Details on when to hear these news and information broadcasts are available at the club website www.raotc.org.au. The VK3OTN is available on a wide range of radio platforms, HF, VHF and UHF, T-meter repeaters, amateur television, DMR, that is digital mobile radio, and D-Star. These news broadcasts are available for download for up to 6 months, just in case you miss the original news broadcast from the RAOTC website. If you'd like to contact the club, then why not send us an email? raotc@raotc.org.au. I hope you enjoy this month's broadcast.
Hi there, this is Alan Dave on VK3AMD and associated relay stations is VK3OTN for the Radio Amateur Old Timers Club. We begin today's transmission with a message from our President, Bill Roper, VK3VR, and here is what Bill has to say.
Hi there. As promised in last month's broadcast, here is a brief report on the mid-February meeting of the RAOTC Committee of Management. All members of the committee, with the exception of Bruce Bathol's VK3UV, who was away assisting with the YSN involvement in fighting bushfires, attended this first meeting of 2003. As the first order of business, Ron Cook, VK3AFW, and Jim Gordon, VK3ZKK, were elected and welcome to membership of the RAOTC Incorporated Committee of Management. Items of business discussed included the club's finances. Arthur, VK3VQ, tabled the financial statements for the current financial year to the 31st of December 2002 and advised that, in view of the satisfactory state of the club's finances as shown in the accounts, there is no reason to increase any of the current fees at the present time. Of course, this can be reviewed at any time if any factor comes up to alter the situation. However, at present, the club has adequate reserves to cover any foreseeable problems, at least in the short term. Some members have asked if alternate methods of paying the annual subs, other than cheque or cash or postal order, could be introduced. However, in view of the small amounts involved, it was eventually decided it would not be practical because of the additional cost to the club. The committee also reviewed the club's insurance cover. Late last year, the club secured a very suitable public liability cover by working with the WIA New South Wales Division. For the present, the committee decided that this insurance cover is quite adequate and that no further action is necessary. Ron Fisher, VK3OM, made mention that volunteers to relay the monthly RAOTC news and information sessions were becoming very difficult to obtain. He asked all members of the committee to see if they could recruit any suitable amateurs to assist. A new club logo, needed because of the change of the club name due to incorporation and designed by the President, was tabled and approved. Members will see this new logo on the front cover of the next issue of OTN magazine. The production and publishing of OTN magazine was discussed. The present publishing dates of March and September are to continue, but trying to tie it in with the dates of the Victorian luncheons does raise some problems. In the past, it was considered desirable that the magazine be ready to mail out to members early in the months of March and September, as this meant some saving in postage by having it available to be given out at the luncheons. However, this procedure also means that a further sorting is needed after the print post sort, which can delay the bulk posting. Therefore, it was decided to leave it for decision at the time of each issue. Should the RAOTCA Incorporated have its own web page? In theory, yes, but how much would it cost, etc.? This matter was left in the hands of the President to look into regarding costs and who would be responsible for setting up the web page and maintaining it. Arthur Evans, VK3VQ, advised he would be away from home from the 5th of June until the 5th of July this year, and it was not practicable to readdress RAOTC letters in that period. However, Arthur felt there would not be any real volume of correspondence in that period to worry about. The meeting decided to advise members to contact the President if any matter was considered urgent during that period. Arthur also advised that another member of the committee was needed to sign cheques if required, as we lost 2 committee members last year who were available to do this. The President was nominated by the committee to act in this case, and steps to register him as a signatory are to be taken. If any member requires a copy of the minutes of this February Committee of Management meeting, a copy will be sent by email only on receipt of a request to the club's new email address of, all in lowercase letters of course, raotc@optusnet.com.au. Also, until such time as a web page is up and running, a real audio file of each monthly RAOTC news and information broadcast will be emailed to members on receipt of a request to the club's email address, which once again is raotc@optusnet.com.au. Until next month, have a great time with this wonderful hobby of ours, amateur radio. 73 from Bill Roper, VK3BR, President.
Thank you, Bill. Stand by just a moment. Right, here we go. That was a very interesting message from Bill, and some things you may well have made a note of. This is VK3OTN. Here in Melbourne, we'll meet for our usual very enjoyable three-course luncheon on Tuesday, March the 11th. It will be at our usual place, the Bentley Club, and the guest speaker for a very interesting talk will be Warrant Officer Chris Tubman, a staff member of the Australian Defence Forces School of Signals at Simpson Barracks, Watsonia. His subject will be Modern Army Communications. The charge for the lunch will remain unchanged at $27.50, including refreshments, as on the past three occasions. We sit down to lunch at 1 p.m. sharp. The room will be open from 12 noon. The Bentley Club, situated in Yawler Street, Bentley, that's spelt Y-A-W-L-A, Yawler Street, and members will have received booking forms, and you're requested to return them to the Secretary Arthur Evans, VK3BQ, as soon as possible. We invite listeners from other clubs to attend this interesting talk, but please note, firm bookings must be made with Arthur Evans not later than Thursday, March the 6th. Arthur is QTHR, and his phone number is 959842262. Repeat, 959842262. The AAF Signals and Radar Association of South Australia, which includes many of our members, will hold their annual Anzac Day reunion on Tuesday, April the 15th at the Marion Hotel in Mitchell Park at 12 noon for a lunch at 12:30. Bookings should be made by the April the 12th for Jack Townsend, VK5HT, Ray Dean 5RK, or Ron Coate, VK5RB. And in Western Australia, our friends in VK6 will have their usual convivial lunch at the Bayside Tavern tomorrow week, Tuesday, March the 11th, and a good attendance is expected. Pity some of us over here in the eastern states can't get there to join you fellas. And this is VK3OTN for the Radio Amateur Old-Timers Club. Today we welcome to full membership Barry Burns, VK6ADI, who becomes member number 1273, and Graham Mann, VK3JGM, who becomes full life member number 1274. Welcome, Barry and Graham. Graham's the son of the late Bruce Mann, VK3BN, whose hefty signal from a massive antenna farm made his name well known not only in Australia but all over the world. This is VK3OTN. Last month we had an interesting item from Wesley Phillips, who had the call signs VK3EZ pre-war and VK3YN for a while post-war. Wesley also held a first-class commercial operator certificate from July 1959 and was an officer of the Forest Commission Victoria from 1964 to 1979. Wesley writes, in 1964, all radio equipment operated by the Forest Commission and the Country Fire Authority was situated in the radio frequency band of 2 to 3 megahertz. It was heavy, inefficient, and used fragile vacuum tubes and vibrator power supplies and probably worst of all, required a large base station antenna which was useless, which, unless constructed in a vertical configuration, were very directional in propagation. These types of base station antennae also had a high angle of radiation, which meant that very often a mobile at a distance of 10 kilometres could not receive signals from base, but the base station was more often than not delivering strong signals to points well over 200 kilometres distance. This applied to both vertical and horizontal antennae, although vertical antennae radiated an omnidirectional signal. The equipment also had the additional extreme limitation of being amplitude modulated, and as impulse noises in the spectrum are also AM, static from lightning, machinery, ignition systems, etc. played havoc, and in particular at lightning strike times when communications were critical. During my long association and regulatory role with the type of communications used by Forest Commission, I was very aware that radical changes had to be made eventually, and when I was appointed to the position of Assistant Communications Officer, I set about planning this only to be met with open objection by the Communications Officer. I was also given a strict mandate by Mr. Gill to produce a radical new portable radio to be known as the FP1, that's Forest Phone 1. I turn a page here, and goes on. Somewhere about 1964, I was appointed to the position of Communications Officer of the Forest Commission of Victoria. At this time, forest communications were not crash hot. When I saw what faced me, I was somewhat dismayed. Excuse me. Crude base antennas with single wire 600 ohm feed, folded sometimes to make them fit in. Portable radios with dry batteries. Mobile radios with helical antennas that at least 6 feet long worked against every low bow. Base radios that were not even crystal locked to base frequency. Luckily, the Chief Fire Protection Officer, which at that time was Ted Gill, agreed with me that the system was in a mess, but I was aghast when he directed me to put all my resources into the development of portable transceiver for operation in the 2 to 5 megahertz band, and for this unit to be transistor equipped. I replied that he was not asking me for a development, rather an invention, as no one had yet been able to produce large amounts of RF power from a transistor without puncturing the transistor junction. We urgently imported a couple of units from the USA through a local agent, which claimed to produce an output of 5 watts. Test results, they both blew finals immediately, and the antennas looked like being mismatched. A fat lot of good for use of untrained foresters. I was satisfied that the high RF voltages developed by open-wound high-Q tank coils would always be a problem, and AWA said that research was ongoing all over the world to solve this. Then I read a French technical journal that ferrite toroids had been developed, capable of operating into high frequencies, and I was able to obtain one of the first to arrive. This was wound with about 20 turns of 16-gauge wire across a micro-compression capacitor, resonated in the region I wanted, and glory be, I eventually got 15 watts out of the thing, with the final pair of transistors happy as could be. You couldn't blow them. AWA had just released their Teleradio 60B using vacuum finals also. It was equipped with a transistorized receiver module covering the band I wanted. I inveigled a couple of these and quickly had a prototype operating, powered by one of Yaesu's big little 12-volt gel batteries, and it provided completely reliable minimum of 10 to 12 watts, which allowed it to be a viable proposition, installed as a mobile which could be quickly detached and used as a portable with a folding helical antenna. AWA came to the party for the manufacture of 350 units and mentioned that, to their knowledge, we had the world first. We named them the Forest Phone FP1, and very faithful service they gave. However, I did not agree with the use of these frequencies for our requirement, and eventually converted the whole system to low-band VHF-FM with UHF-controlled repeaters. I retired at 60 years and did take out the call sign BK3YN for a time, but commercial equipment was boring, so I gave it in. And Wesley says, I'm now 83 years of age and my present hobby is ultralight aircraft. I've just completed the building of a J-Guru 3300. And just further to that story, about the forest phone, we have a copy of a letter from AWA to the Forestry Commissioner of Victoria dated the 27th of July 1965. It reads as follows. Thank you for the opportunity to assist the prototype all-transistor HF transceiver with a view to submitting a proposal for its manufacture. From our preliminary tests of this unit, we found the development work undertaken by your officer, Mr. Philpott, is considerably advanced and, as a consequence, minimises the engineering required to ensure production of equipment at our factory. With these aspects in mind, we consider it would be to the Commission's advantage if Mr. Philpott was able to spend 3 or 4 days with our project engineer, Mr. F. Holliday, at our works at 554 Parramatta Road, Ashfield, to discuss both the design and general concept of the unit. Following Mr. Phillips' visit to our Ashfield plant, we'll submit a proposal for the manufacture of the unit for consideration by the Commission. So there's an interesting bit of history of development of radios here in Victoria. This is VK3ATN, VK3AMD and associated relay stations. And here's an item provided by Ray Peterson, VK6PW. It's about the Japanese midget submarines and their motherships, the I-class submarines. The article comes from the Engineers Australia Journal for September 2002 and is written by Ian McFarlane, a railway engineer and former intelligence officer. His sources are acknowledged as the RAN Official History and the well-known James series of books. I'm omitting a few paragraphs, but we will publish the full story in a future issue of OTN. This is VK3ATN, and this account goes as follows. The attack on Sydney was mounted from a flotilla of 5 mother submarines of the Imperial Japanese Navy's B-1, B-2 and B-3 classes under the command of Captain Henkyu Sasaki of 1937-40 concept and generally termed high boats. They were unusually large, long-range patrol subs intended to operate not only in the traditional lone wolf role, but if desired as a strike flotilla. The formidable fleet Admiral Yamamoto of Pearl Harbor fame was a protagonist of this concept, and as a result the high boats had unusual mixes of armaments. I-21 of the B-1 class was typical, and among the 1942 Sydney ships. A very large sub for her time, she was 109 metres long, 9.3 metres beam and 5.2 metres draft, displacing some 2,600 tonnes surface and 3,700 tonnes when dived. This was about twice that of contemporary US Navy Gateway class, which were patrolling similar Pacific distances, and 3 times that of the German Type IX U-boats, creating mayhem in the Atlantic. I-21 had 2 diesels totaling 4,625 kilowatts, giving her a speed of 23.5 knots on the surface, and 2 electric motors totaling 1,500 kilowatts, giving about 8 knots when dived, to a maximum depth of 100 metres. The I-boat ranges were up to 38,000 kilometres on the surface and 32 hours endurance at 5 kilometres an hour when submerged. Some I-boats had a primitive form of radar by late 1941. I-21 had forward of the sail a short watertight cylindrical aircraft hangar from which a long fixed catapult runway rose along the forward casing almost to the bows. The small one-man aircraft had folding wings and a range of 3 hours and 150 kilometres an hour. It had a radio for gun respawning. Flying operations were somewhat fair weather as the aircraft had to be powered up and catapulted off, with the submarine also powering at maximum speed into the wind and perhaps a head sea. All on an open deck only some 2 metres above the waterline. The little aeroplane landed in the open and was recovered by a derrick. Captain Sasaki's Sydney flotilla and their mix of exotic weaponry were I-21 with aircraft, I-22 with a midget, and I-21, I-24 a midget as determined by the RAN, I-27 a midget, number 14, and I-29 aircraft believed unserviceable on the 30th of May. 10 days earlier, on Wednesday the 20th of May, I-29's aircraft overflew Sydney Harbour completely undetected, even though Sydney had air defence radar at this time. Then at 3 o'clock on Saturday morning, the 30th of May, Lieutenant Sasomi Ita was catapulted off I-21, some 64 kilometres northeast of North Head. He too overflew Sydney, detected but wrongly identified by the US cruiser Chicago as a Curtiss seaplane, and likewise unmolested. But when landing in rough water, his little flat plane capsized and sank. He survived the crash and the war. On the basis of his report of capital ships in the harbour, Sasaki ordered preparation and release of the 3 midgets from I-22, 24 and 27 at dusk. The next day, Sunday the 31st of May, some 11 kilometres off the heads, navigation lights were obligingly burning, and the gate and boom defence net from Greenpoint to George's Head was open not only for naval and steamer traffic, but a 30-minute service of Manly ferries. Midget 14 crossed the detector loop at 20 hours 14 and got caught in the net. The alarm was not given until 22:27, and Midget 14 was finally destroyed at 22:35. Midget 21 was attacked by HMAS Yandra between the heads at 23:07, but survived. And with Midget 8, he got through the net gate, probably in the wake of either the cargo steamer Wyanjiri inbound from the north coast or a Manly ferry. At 22:50, Chicago spotted the periscope some 500 metres away. A fired 2 torpedoes from near Bradley's Head. They missed Chicago but exploded under the old wooden barracks ferry SS Cuttable at Garden Island, killing 21 RAN sailors. RAN small craft pinned down Midget 21. Its crew destroyed the boat and themselves, but the daringly handled Midget A escaped through the net. This is all part of a talk, an article about this in the Engineers Journal, and this is VK3OTN. This submarine was never seen again, as the operation had called for sailing some 55 kilometres from launch to return to another ships and involved full power manoeuvring to avoid RAN attackers. My guess is that her batteries probably died somewhere between the heads and the 5 lifeboats waiting off Newport and Palm Beach, and the crew destroyed the ship and themselves. The K-10 Midget Hulk synthesised from the 2 wrecks is on display at the Australian War Memorial in Canberra. An abalone fisherman was supposed to have found, sunk on the seabed off the far south coast of New South Wales, the wreck of an I-boat. It may be the boat bombed by RAAF Hudson off Cobo Island on 4th of June 42. Within the hours of the Battle of Sydney Harbour on the 1st of June, 2 midgets, the I-10 and 16 and 20, attacked RN ships anchored at Vigo Sierras in Madagascar, sinking a 7,000-ton tanker and damaging the battleship HMS Ramillies. And on the 8th of June, this I-21 shelled Newcastle and I-24 shelled Sydney, in both cases ineffectually. But 7 merchant ships were sunk and another 5 attacked off the New South Wales coast around this time. In mid-43, the I-boats, including I-21, returned, sinking 11 ships on the New South Wales coast and damaging 3. On the 14th of May, the Australian hospital ship Central was torpedoed off Brisbane, probably by I-178, with a loss of 269 lives. Nobody admitted this war crime. So while consuming twice the naval resources of a US Gato boat, an I-boat could torpedo an unarmed merchant ship. Big deal. Strategically, however, their record was poor, and of 29 O-boats in these 3 classes, only 2 survived the war. It seems they were too big, too complicated, and too vulnerable for their time. And that's the end of that article. Thank you, Ray Peterson, for sending it along. Newer members of our club may not realise that in the March 94 and September 99 issues of our magazine OTN, we published for the first time in the world a lot of information about the very interesting and effective radio transceivers installed in the Midget sub. And this information was obtained from the Australian Archives in Melbourne. is VK3OTN for the Radio Amateur Old-Timers Club. Radio telescopes. Radio magazines have been reporting the death in Tasmania last year of the man who was credited with being the first man to design and build a radio telescope. This was in his home country of America. His later years were spent in Tasmania, where he built a large one, which has apparently fallen into disrepair. Articles written by Grant Weber appear in many technical publications over the years. Our own radio telescope at Parkes in New South Wales is world famous for its performance. And thinking about these things reminds me that when the Parkes radio telescope had been designed and was being built, the man who was to be its director, Taffy Bowen, gave a talk to the Institute of Radio Engineers at the Radio Department Theatre at the RMIT in Swanson Street. I've always remembered his words when talking about its expected performance, when he said, and I quote, "We might be able to see to the edge of the universe," unquote. Incidentally, you may not know that Taffy Bowen, who was a pioneer of radio research in Britain, was the man who carried the top-secret newly developed magnetron to the USA, together with all the design and performance information. His task was to enable the USA to gear up its vast industrial capacity to manufacture the magnetron on a much greater scale than Britain could manage. The Americans were totally astonished at the sample's performance, but there's one thing that took a lot of explaining. The sample had 7 cavities. The drawing showed 8. The phone stayed on in the USA for, I think, several months until quantity production was up and running. Back to radio telescopes. The July 1975 issue of a magazine that I've now mislaid carried an article and photographs about what was claimed to be the largest unit in the world, operated by America and located at Arecibo in Puerto Rico. We've all heard about it over the years. It's a 3.05 metre diameter reflector in the mountain valley. The article includes a statement that will give you something to think about. It says, and I quote, "One of the most dramatic improvements to the telescope has been the addition of a powerful new radar transmitter. This new transmitter has an output of 450 kilowatts, and when concentrated into a narrow beam by the reflector, has an effective radiated power 100 times greater than the total electric power production of all the generating plants in the world." Unquote. You might like to get out your slide rule or calculator and check that calculation. I'd be interested in your findings. This is VK3AMD, is VK3OTN with associated relay stations. The story that follows might well be true, but I wasn't there and so can't vouch for it. In wartime Vietnam, an Australian soldier was very much in love with his wife, whose name was Glenda. So much so, in fact, he had her name tattooed on his penis, where it normally showed only as the first and last letters, G and A. One time on the way from the front on RMR leave, he entered a nearby toilet to have what in colloquial terms is called a pee. And he stood there, he glanced sideways and was intrigued to find that the tall, dark GI Joe alongside had the same 2 letters showing in a similar place to his own. As they both turned to walk away, the Aussie plucked up his courage and told the American he'd inadvertently seen the G and A letters, which in his case were the beginning and end of his dear wife's name, Glenda, and wondered if, by some strange coincidence, they formed part of the same name. "That's okay, Aussie, mate," said the GI. "When I get excited, mine spells out good old Alabama. And on that happy note, I'll leave you to our next merry meeting, which my calendar says will be April Fool's Day." This is Alan Global VK3AMD and associated relay stations as VK3OTN, the official call sign of the Radio Amateur Old-Timers Club of Australia, Incorporated. We're about to conclude our news and information transmission for this month and hope our listeners have found it interesting. The next monthly news and information transmission will be on air on Monday, April the 1st. Repeat, Monday, April the 1st, and that's not a joke. It'll be at the same times and frequencies as today, remembering that in April we will no longer be on daylight saving time here in the eastern states. The callback systems that will follow today's transmission will take two forms to enable us to understand our listening audience. The first call will be for listeners to give only their name and call sign so we know that you were listening, and that's very important. Then the callback operators will be looking for all who wish to make reports or comments, and we look forward to lots of both types of calls. Thank you for listening, and 73.
That's all we have for you this month, and we hope you found something of interest. Thanks for being with us, and we hope you will join in the callbacks, where callbacks are taken. The next RAOTC News and Information broadcast will take place on the first Monday of next month, on the same frequencies, and at the same times as today, with the exception of January. If you have missed all or part of this broadcast, or you just want to listen to it again, it is available for download from the RAOTC website. Simply go to www.raotc.org.au. Again, the website URL is www.raotc.org.au. Sometimes the relay station is an automated broadcast, for example, a repeater, where no operator is available to take callbacks. Other times the volunteer operator suffers from very heavy local QRM, and callbacks are not always possible. Many operators need a small amount of time to switch from playing a recorded file to using a microphone. Please be mindful of this. This is VK3OTN signing clear from today's news and information session. 73 from the RAOTC broadcast team.